Today, I invite you to join me on an extraordinary journey through time in the ranks of the Roman legions, to hear the voice of a man who lived and fought within one of the greatest war machines the world has ever seen, the Legio Decima Gemina. His name is Aulus Drusus, a veteran of Rome, and these are his memoirs. First-hand accounts from a soldier who marched alongside valiant centurions, crossed untamed lands, and defeated ruthless enemies. But this story is not only about battles and glory. Today, I want to reveal a lesser-known yet crucial aspect of the Empire's success. What we ate, how we nourished ourselves, and what foods gave us the strength to endure grueling marches, endless sieges, and the biting cold of the frontiers. Behind every raised sword, every shield that withstood a blow, was a human body that needed to be fed, cared for, and restored. Many believe that legionaries were rough and simple men who survived on little more than dry bread and water. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our diet was varied and carefully considered because a hungry or weak soldier could never bear the weight of duty. Meat, vegetables, legumes, fruit, fish, and of course wine all were essential parts of our daily life, even in the harshest conditions. In this tale, you will hear not only of the hardships of military life, but also of the care our commanders took to ensure the well-being of their men. They knew well that a starving army is a lost army. Through the words, scents, flavors, labors, and hopes of a legionary, a world will come alive before your eyes, and you'll begin to understand how nutrition was a true military science, essential in building and maintaining the power of Rome. So, prepare to immerse yourself in the memories of a man who gave everything for the empire, not only with his sword, but with the daily courage to live, march, and eat. Follow me on this epic journey, through the past and memory, and discover what it truly meant to be a Roman soldier. Hail! My name is Aulus Drusus, and I was a legionary for 25 years under the standard of the Eagle. I have seen the snow of the Alps and the scorching sands of Syria. I fought against screaming Germanic tribes, built forts along the Danube, and dug trenches with hands stained by earth and blood. But before all of that I ate. Yes, I ate like a Roman legionary. And believe me, without food, no soldier can survive, and no empire can stand. Now, as a veteran retired to a modest farmstead near Tiber, I feel compelled to share an aspect of our life that few remember, the legionary's diet. It may not be as glorious a subject as battles or decorations, but if we manage to conquer half the world, we owe it in part to what we put into our stomachs. What I remember most, more than the flavors and smells, was the moment of the meal itself. Sitting together, tired but alive, filthy but brothers. Breaking bread, passing around an onion, laughing at a joke while the fire burned. In those moments there were no ranks. Only men united by toil, cold, and hunger. Even now, as I watch the fire crackle in my courtyard, I sometimes prepare a meal, just like we did back then. I eat it slowly, eyes closed. And for a brief moment, I hear the sounds of the camp again, the clang of iron, the murmur of evening prayers. I relive those years when our strength lay not only in our swords, but in the bread we shared. This is how legionaries ate. This is how we endured, marched, fought, and built an empire. And so, I leave you these words, so that it is not forgotten that even the soul of the Roman soldier passed through the stomach. Many remember our deeds for the glory of battle, for the cities we conquered, for the roads we carved into the earth like eternal scars. But few know what truly kept us standing, day after day, march after march, battle after battle. It wasn't just training, nor was it courage. It was the bread. Yes, the bread of the Roman legionary, the one we made ourselves, with our own hands, with our own sweat, was our first ally. Without that simple, tough, and faithful food, no army could have withstood the distances, the hardships, the frost, and the perils of the known world. And I do so with the voice of one who wore the helmet for 25 winters and never stopped chewing grain, even in the rain. Every month, as predictably as the full moon, we received our ration of wheat, unmilled grain which we had to process ourselves. It was part of our pay, or rather, it was deducted from our wages. Nothing was given to us freely, not even our nourishment. Rome was generous with glory, but frugal with coin. We had to be self-sufficient. They gave us the grain, and it was up to us to turn it into flour, knead it, and bake it. We carried a portable hand mill that weighed nearly 20 kilograms, but luckily it traveled with the pack animals, along with the tents and tent poles. Once camp was set up in the evening, we took turns grinding the grain while others prepared the dough. In silence, like a ritual. When the bread baked on the stones, its aroma mixed with the scent of sweat and soil. It was the smell of survival. In addition to wheat, we often used spelt, coarser but nourishing. With it, we made a kind of porridge that simmered slowly in our black, soot-covered pots. The porridge was rough, monotonous, but warm. Sometimes we stirred in a bit of oil or a drop of milk if the local market had any to offer. Barley, on the other hand, was despised among us soldiers. It was the grain of punishment. When someone failed in their duty, the centurion would command, "Give him barley for 3 days." It was tougher, less nutritious, harder to digest. Titus Livius may have told you it was imposed as a penalty, and he was right. But in war, even barley can save you. I remember Dyrrachium. We were under siege, supplies gone, enemy winds howling around us. Only sacks of barley remained. We ate, we survived, we won. Millet made the occasional appearance. Sweeter to the taste, but less commonly used. We preferred it in warmer climates like Africa. Every day when we weren't marching or fighting, the ritual repeated. Whole grain flour, water, and strong arms. The flour that came from the millstone was dark, rough, full of fiber. Petronius used to say it helped our guts, and he was right. The camp latrines were always busy, but never clogged. The health of a legionary began with his belly. Once the dough was ready, we laid it on hot stones or in iron pans. No yeast. The result was hard, but filling. One loaf could sustain you for hours. And if we had to depart before dawn, no time to knead. Then we grabbed a dry biscuit carried in the pack, tough as the soul of the oldest centurion. I always carried 3 or 4. One sip of water to soften it, and it felt like a feast. On certain campaigns, the general would order us to lighten our loads. No pot, no mill, only hardtack and weapons. Those were harsh times, but we marched faster. There was something profound in the daily act of making one's own bread. It made us men, not servants. Even Emperor Caracalla himself loved to mix with the legionaries and knead bread with them. He did it not to feign humility, but because preparing bread meant being a legionary to the core, and Rome understood this. When we returned home on leave, people looked at us with respect not only for our scars or the tattered purple cloaks we wore, but because we were men who had earned every crumb of their survival. Now, as my days pass slowly among the olive trees and vines, I still make my own bread. I keep an old millstone, and now and then, with tired hands, I turn it. The sound of the stone takes me back. I see the camp at dawn again. My comrades around the fire, the centurion passing in silence, the first light on the tents, and I feel, deep inside, that every loaf needed back then was a small act of resistance, of dignity, of belonging. That's how a legionary ate. That's how he lived, and that's how he triumphed over death. I, Aulus Drusus, swear it on my last loaf. I still remember the first day I stepped through the gates of the training camp in Capua. Young, full of fire, my heart swollen with dreams and my head filled with legends of invincible heroes and conquests beyond the edge of the world. But I soon understood that the life of a legionary was not made only of glory, forced marches, and the clash of swords. No, my brother, the real war, was also the war against hunger. And on that front, meat was a precious, though sometimes elusive, ally. Let's put to rest a myth I still hear whispered among the ignorant that we legionaries lived only on barley soup and dry bread. Nonsense, I say with the wisdom of a veteran who marched from Brundisium to the plains of Gaul. Our diet was varied, and not out of luxury, but necessity. A hungry soldier is a weak soldier. A depleted army conquers nothing. Our field medics, followers of the wisdom of Galen and Hippocrates, already knew well that the body needs many elements: meat for strength, grains for endurance, legumes for inner vitality. And meat, oh yes, meat was an essential part of our nourishment. Anyone who says otherwise has either never worn a lorica or never felt the exhaustion of the march. The most common meat? Pork, without a doubt. Not only abundant, but versatile. We made savory sausages, salted hams that kept us company through long winter months or during sieges. I still remember the smell of meat roasting over the campfire, while the sentries kept watch and the wind carried the aroma to the edges of the tents. It was comfort, my brother. It was a taste of home. And then there was that salted and smoked pork that never failed to be in my satchel. It could last for weeks, months even, and just a small piece was enough to revive me after a long day of marching or hard labor building fortifications. You chewed it slowly, almost like it was a reward, and in those bites you found the strength to go on. But it wasn't just pork. In the lands of Gaul and Britannia, we often came across sheep and goats that provided us with rich, flavorful meat. It was especially welcomed stronger in taste, wilder. When local farmers gave up their flocks, and they often did, once they saw our swords, the camp turned into something like a feast. We boiled the meat, roasted it, shared it, and every piece was a celebration. Even barnyard animals had their place in our diet. Chickens, ducks, geese. Tender meat, easy to cook, and perfect for comrades who were sick or wounded. Vegetius, wise among the wise, recommended raising poultry during sieges. And indeed, during those long weeks waiting before the walls of a hostile city, the hens scratching around our tents were a blessing. They gave us not only meat, but also eggs, priceless for those who needed to regain their strength. On certain occasions, when the land allowed and the centurion gave us time, we turned to hunting. Game, yes, deer, hares, even wild boars. Once, in the forests of Noricum, I myself struck down a boar with a javelin, a beast that challenged us with red eyes and sharp tusks. We brought it back to camp as a trophy, and that evening was a true celebration. But that kind of meat was rare a gift of fortune, not a regular provision. How much did we eat? About half a Roman pound a day, around 160 grams, more or less. Was it enough? For a man hardened like us, it was. We didn't seek to fill our bellies, but to fuel our strength to fight and survive. Meat was a means, not a luxury. Horse meat? Only when the sky closed in above our heads and the gods turned away. It was the last resort, when supply lines were cut and the enemy pressed hard. Once, during the siege of Oxellodunum, we were forced to slaughter the pack animals. I remember the silence, the pain in the eyes of those who had marched for months beside their own horses. But hunger, my brother, is a crueler enemy than any army. None of this was left to chance. The organization of the Roman army extended even into its kitchens. We had structured supply chains, cart drivers, merchants who followed us on our campaigns. We bought meat in the markets of the cities we passed through, and often we took it whether consent was given or not from the villages we subdued. There was method in preservation too. Salting, smoking, even techniques you might call modern today. Our camp butchers knew well the art of saving every cut, of using every part of the animal. And if I'm still here today writing these memories, it's also thanks to that meat. It kept me standing under the rains of Flanders and in the freezing cold of the Alps. It gave me the strength to hold my shield for hours, to push my sword forward even when all seemed lost. It wasn't just nourishment. It was part of life, part of the bond that united us brothers in arms beside the fire, under the stars sharing a piece of meat as if it were a piece of hope. I, Aulus Claudius Drusus, veteran of the Legion, now prepare to recount the memories that time has etched upon my soul, and in particular to speak of the humble yet irreplaceable gifts of the earth, the vegetables that accompanied me along the roads of the empire. It wasn't only meat with its strength and flavor that brought comfort to my belly during long marches and harsh battles. I too, like any wise legionary, knew well that a varied and balanced diet was the foundation for staying fit and fighting with both spirit and body intact. I still remember the days when, as the troops made camp, the centurions emphasized the importance of supplementing our diet with vegetables. As battle wounds slowly healed and our sweat marked the day's toil, our medics and sages would always advise us not to rely solely on meat and bread for sustenance. And so, alongside lively debates about siege tactics, we would often hear, in almost fatherly tones, about the value of legumes, herbs, and roots that could be found in every corner of the Roman provinces. In our feasts and daily rations, legumes stood out, broad beans, lentils, and peas. I remember with a certain nostalgia the evenings around the fire, where between tales of glory we shared warm, comforting dishes made with these legumes. In those moments, even far from the splendor of Rome, it was as though we could taste a fragment of home, a memory of our mothers, of our women. But it wasn't only legumes that found their way into our meals. During marches through the wild, almost untouched landscapes of conquered lands, we gathered with skilled hands the herbs and roots that the generous earth offered us. The use of these plants wasn't just a matter of necessity. It was a traditional practice, passed down with care. Each plant had its meaning, some to invigorate the body, others to soothe wounds and purify the air around us. We were well aware that, even though the battlefield was ruled by iron and fire, the true power of our strength lay in knowing how to draw the most genuine nourishment from the land. When speaking of these gifts of nature, garlic immediately comes to mind, one of the most treasured herbs of all. We Romans, far from seeing garlic as a mere seasoning, used it also as a powerful disinfectant. Its pungent scent, which might intimidate those with a sensitive nose, was for us a sign of protection and health. There wasn't a dish it didn't find its way into. Even if some considered it too strong, I knew well that eating it raw could mean the difference between wellness and weakness during a long siege or after an exhausting battle. Even among the ranks of the army, the use of garlic gave rise to anecdotes that colored our days. I especially remember one amusing occasion during a time when feasts and gatherings around the fire gave us a chance to laugh and joke, even amid hardship. A centurion named Lucius, eager to appear refined and perhaps a bit too concerned with his image, had decided to perfume himself with a fine ointment, almost as if to mask the natural scent of garlic. When it was noticed, our Emperor Vespasian, known for his sharp wit, couldn't resist making a jab. Frankly, I would have preferred you smelled of garlic rather than that perfume, that ointment you've applied. The jest, though it brought laughter, made it clear that the authentic aroma of garlic was seen as a sign of virility and practicality, rather than of delicate taste. In that moment, one could clearly see that despite some differences in personal habits, health and bodily strength were values shared and celebrated by all. Not least, it must be remembered that each day, along with our main ration, we were also given a carefully measured portion of vegetables, about 50 grams. As I recall these memories, I am struck by how, amidst so much military glory and the clashing of weapons, care for the body and the pursuit of well-being were always valued. The art of war, I often told myself, is not won by iron alone, but also by a well-nourished body and a clear mind. That is precisely why my days were marked by small pauses gathering herbs, digging up roots and giving garlic its rightful place of honor at the table, where it could turn a simple meal into a rite of renewal. Many years have passed since those days, and now the weight of experience is etched in the lines on my face. Yet every time I taste the bitter aftertaste of garlic or the delicate aroma of carefully cooked lentils, my thoughts return to those training camps and tireless marches, to those moments of simple yet deeply human sharing. Vegetables, for me, have become a symbol of resilience, of the capacity to endure hardship and to find strength in simplicity. May the gods have granted me the strength to live so many years and to write these words, so that future generations might understand not only the value of courage on the battlefield, but also the hidden wisdom in nourishing, with respect, the body that enabled us to face the unknown. Among the foods that accompanied me through days of glory and those darker hours, two in particular hold a special place in my memory: cheese and olive oil. Cheese was a faithful companion. There was no camp, fortress, or battlefield where it was not present. It came from the milk of cows, sheep, or goats, depending on the region we were stationed in and the local availability. Each kind of milk gave the cheese a distinct flavor, but they all shared one thing. They nourished the body effectively, and just as importantly, they were light to carry. The advantages of such a food were clear to us soldiers who carried our lives on our backs. To bring a piece of cheese meant carrying a compact source of energy, something that didn't spoil easily and could be eaten at any time of day. I recall how it was often made near camp, using freshly milked supplies from local herds or flocks sometimes offered as tribute by conquered villages or bought at market. It took little: a container, some rennet, and the time needed for the curd to solidify. Many times, as we rested under the scorching sun of southern Gaul or during a break in the heart of Germanic lands, we would break bread and eat it with a bit of cheese. A daily portion was about 30 grams, not much, but enough to complete a meal and give us a sense of satisfaction. In those moments, even the simplest bite could restore strength to weary muscles and minds. The taste of cheese, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft and creamy, was always welcome. But if cheese was the heart of the meal, olive oil was its soul. Oil, that golden, dense liquid our forefathers had learned to extract from olives, was something sacred to us. Not just nourishment, but a true elixir. We used it to season legumes, to soften bread, to cook the wild herbs we gathered along the way. A single drop of oil poured over a humble dish could transform it into food worthy of a Roman citizen. But oil was not just a seasoning. It had many other uses, all of them precious. We used it to treat minor wounds, to soothe sunburned skin, to massage our tired legs after a march. When the cold bit into our joints and it felt as if they had rusted, a warm oil rub worked wonders. Many of us drank it in small quantities, convinced and with good reason that it strengthened the body, detoxified it, and gave energy. Some mixed it with wine or hot water in potions passed down through generations of legionaries. There was a time when we were camped for many months near the Danube River. The winter was harsh, and supplies began to run low. During that period, olive oil became almost a miraculous resource for us. The barrels that arrived from the rear were welcomed as if they were gold. I remember one day, after a long patrol, I returned to camp with blistered feet and cracked hands. A fellow soldier, Domitius, handed me a small flask of oil and, without saying a word, helped me rub it into my feet. The relief was immediate. In that gesture lay all the solidarity and humanity that bound us soldiers together. Sometimes, after a long and heavy day, I enjoyed rubbing myself down with oil scented with myrtle or rosemary, feeling my body relax, my muscles loosen, and the fatigue fade away. That act, almost ritual, reminded me that, though we were soldiers, we were still men. Fish, in truth, was like us legionaries, resilient, able to survive in all conditions, and often forced to adapt. You couldn't find it every day, but when the opportunity came to get some, no one held back. I myself, more than once, spent an entire morning with my hands frozen in a river, using a makeshift hook and a farmer's patience. There, on the Rhine or the Danube, our camps often rose near the water, not just to drink or wash, but also to fish. The fish we pulled out were certainly no senatorial delicacies. Trout, pike, sturgeon, river fish, tough like us. They were common catches, but tasty, and when thrown into a pot with some garlic or herbs found along the bank, they made us feel like we were eating at home. I still remember, during the siege of a Germanic village, a fellow soldier from the 6th cohort who managed to haul in a massive sturgeon. 8 of us ate from it, and we still had leftovers. That day, war seemed far away, if only for a while. We made do with whatever we could find. There were rudimentary hooks, sometimes real fishing tools we crafted on the spot or carried with us. Every time we camped near a river, someone was bound to try their luck with a line. Some, the more experienced ones, had become almost professional fishermen. There was no shortage of tales and contests over who had caught the biggest fish, and when someone returned with a good haul, it was shared with pride. It was an act of brotherhood that united us like an oath. Sea fish, on the other hand, was a different story, altogether rare, expensive, often poorly preserved. It wasn't easy to find, especially in the inland provinces. Yet, surprisingly, cod, tuna, and anchovies still managed to reach us in the heart of the empire. Imagine the journey those fish made from the sea to the mountains, transported in tightly sealed containers, salted to last the distance. But the risk was always lurking. Salting preserved, yes, but it didn't perform miracles. I myself had the misfortune, or perhaps the recklessness, of once tasting tuna that reeked more of mold than of the sea. It had arrived with a caravan from the south, sold to us as a delicacy. 2 days later, I and 3 others from my tent were doubled over with stomach pains, sweating like men in armor under the summer sun. Since that day, I've always smelled the fish twice before bringing it to my mouth. And then there was that thick, stinking, divine sauce. It was made from the innards of fish, left to ferment in large jars buried underground. The smell was so strong you could catch it 100 paces away, but once added to bread or vegetables, it transformed everything. Some loved it, others hated it. Me, I respected it. It was a flavor that brought you home to the forum, to the noisy markets where everything was sold and everything mingled. It was the taste of Rome itself. Of course, we didn't make that sauce in the field, but we received it in small amounts like a precious condiment. Some officers had their own personal supplies, others bought it from merchants. There were those who claimed the best quality came from Hispania, and perhaps it was true. When I happened to spread a little of it on dry bread, I would close my eyes and, for a moment, forget the rain, the mud, and the clash of weapons. But the greatest surprise came during a campaign along the Adriatic coast. We were camped near a small port, and for a few days we ate oysters, mussels, even sea snails. I won't lie, at first many turned up their noses. but all it took was a single taste, perhaps with a bit of sauce and bread, and they became irresistible. Over the years, during my campaigns along the empire's borders, from the cold frontier of the Danube to the warm shores of the Adriatic, I had the chance to taste many types of fruit, those that grew wild in the forests or were cultivated in fields near our camps. It was not food to be underestimated. Quite the contrary, fruit was a precious resource for us legionaries. Its presence in our meals was more than just a comfort. It was an immediate source of energy and health. I remember well when, as a young recruit, I learned to recognize those fruits that brought us such relief and vigor after long days of heavy marches and exhausting battles. Apples were perhaps the most common fruit, sturdy and long-lasting. Crisp and tart, apples gave us a sweetness that refreshed both mouth and spirit. I still hold in my mind the image of fields scattered with wild apples, gathered with dirt-stained and calloused hands, amid the murmurs of comrades competing to see who could collect the most. But apples were not the only fruit to grace our table. During our stops and in the rare pauses war allowed us, we sometimes found juicy pears, softer and sweeter, melting almost in the mouth like a gentle gift from nature. Plums, with their dense flesh and sweet, sour taste, were also a rare and much sought-after delight. Grapes, sweet and juicy, were another highly prized fruit. Often, when we camped near vineyards or cultivated lands, we would gather whole bunches and share them as though they were gold. I remember one harsh winter during the siege of a fortress, when the last grapes of autumn had been preserved in amphorae. I stole a bunch to break the monotony of our rations, and that sweetness warmed me more than fire. And then there were cherries, those small red fruits that appeared in spring, sweet and cheerful, like hope during the darkest days of war. We also ate wild berries, blackberries and raspberries gathered secretly during our forest patrols. Their intense and tangy flavor was a small pleasure that reminded us we were still alive, still human, far from the steel and dust of battle. I won't forget the figs, either soft, incredibly sweet fruits with a heady fragrance. When we happened to find them, perhaps along supply routes or near a Roman village, we guarded them closely, for they were like a caress for our weary mouths. Walnuts, hazelnuts, and even chestnuts were also part of our diet, especially in wooded regions where we could gather them for days and then consume them slowly, roasted or mixed with other foods. On the empire's eastern borders, where the climate and soil were different, I saw with my own eyes peaches and apricots growing. These fruits, more delicate and sweet, only came in season and were all the more precious for it. Their juiciness and sweetness refreshed us and gave new strength to our tired limbs. All this fruit wasn't just a treat for the palate or a way to soften the harshness of military life. It was a vital resource, especially because it was rich in water and natural sugars, elements essential to staying strong. In those times, hunger and exhaustion could be worse enemies than any barbarian or rival. Fruit helped us recover energy quickly without weighing us down, and it brought relief to the spirit as well. Even Vegetius, our expert in military strategy, wisely advised stockpiling large reserves of fruit during long sieges. He said that fruit could be dried and preserved for months, a true hidden treasure within our rations. I don't know how many times during preparations for a siege the centurions ordered the gathering and storage of that sweet provision for hard days ahead, and they were right. Now, as the final gift of this account of our daily sustenance, I cannot fail to speak of wine. Ah, wine. For us legionaries, it was much more than a simple drink. It was a source of strength, energy, and comfort during the hard days of marching in cold camps at the edges of the empire, under stormy skies and scorching sun. I speak as one who has known the dust of Roman roads, the clash of arms and long, cold nights, and who has always found in wine relief for body and soul. Wine was a precious food for Roman citizens, and for those who could afford it, a fine, full-bodied nectar, carefully chosen and consumed at banquets. But for us soldiers, the story was a bit different. The drink we were given was not the refined, dense, sweet wine flowing in the patricians' dining halls, but a humbler, more rustic, more functional version. This vinegar of wine, or rather slightly sour wine diluted with water, became our joy. A beverage as simple as it was precious, accompanying every effort we made. I remember as a young man, during a grueling march along the Rhine, a centurion handed me a flask of wine. Its taste was sharp, almost biting, but I immediately felt its effect. The body was invigorated, the spirit refreshed. Wine was not only a comforting drink, but also a high-energy food. I recall well the discussions around campfires when we talked about the best wines. The Romans, as you know, were skilled at recognizing the origins of wine. However, during long campaigns, it was not always easy to find good quality wines. Diluted wine vinegar was thirst-quenching, hygienic, remember that water was often unclean, and gave us that extra push when our strength was low. But it wasn't only wine. We must remember that legionaries also knew and appreciated beer. You might be surprised, but beer was a known and consumed drink among us, especially in the northern provinces of the empire. I tried it myself during my stays at Hadrian's Wall, where the locals produced plenty of it. Legionaries, men like me, often sent messages home complaining about the scarcity of beer and asking their families to procure it, or, failing that, to send money to bribe our centurions for a few extra flasks. Beer was a welcome drink almost as much as wine, especially in the cold, damp lands of the north. This drink, made from barley and other grains, was easier to produce locally than wine, and for many of us it was a familiar comfort, a taste that reminded us of normal life. So, as I close these memories about our food and drink, I leave you with this reflection. The diet of a Roman legionary was not merely about survival, but was a matter of science, experience, and pragmatism. We knew how to choose what gave us strength, endurance, and health, leaving nothing to chance. From the fruit that refreshed and nourished us, to the hard bread, dried meats, and this humble drink of diluted wine or the beer from distant lands. For us soldiers, every meal was an act of care toward our bodies, the most precious tool we had to face winter, battles, and endless marches. The science of military nutrition might have been less known, but it was woven into our rations, into the wisdom of centurions and commanders who understood how much a strong body could make the difference. I conclude this tale, hoping that my experience might inspire anyone today to recognize the value of simple, wholesome food, the balance of substance and pleasure that kept us standing through the hardest days. Health to you, and may the memory of the Roman legionary live on, not only in arms and battles, but also in the flavors that accompanied us along the way. Now you know the story of Aulus Drusus told not through legend or marble inscription, but through the quiet voice of a man who lived it. A life shaped not only by battles and banners, but by bread kneaded in silence, porridge stirred at dusk, and firelight shared among brothers in arms. So now, you can rest. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and imagine, softly, gently, what it must have been like to march through distant provinces under foreign skies, to grind grain beneath starlight, to share a crust of bread beside a comrade, knowing it meant survival. Let the scent of baked loaves and garlic drift through your mind. Let your breath grow slower, your body heavier. Let the world around you begin to blur, like old smoke rising from a Roman hearth. You are safe. You are still. You are here. Let the warmth of the fire cradle you. Let the steady rhythm of ancient embers guide you deeper into stillness. There is no march to make, no shield to lift, no order to follow. Only the memory of distant voices, the sound of the millstone turning, and the comfort of knowing that even in war there were moments of peace. Now, let the night take over. Let your thoughts drift like camp smoke into the stars. Let sleep settle on your shoulders like a woolen cloak. The fire crackles, the tents are still, and all of Rome sleeps.